Check it out. It's the Laugh to Learn podcast. What is going on, everyone? Welcome to a very sleepy episode of the Laugh to Learn podcast. My name is Jacob Paveo, and of course I come to you each and every Wednesday afternoon, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, fresh for you to download the entire world around with a fun spin on all the news you need to know about, all the interesting stories that no one else seems to be discussing. And I mentioned that it is a sleepy episode because it really is. Not much time for sleep for me for the last 3 weeks or so. A combination of real life things going on and work being crazy. Yesterday I worked 5:30 in the morning till 9:30 at night. So that's a good 16-hour work day. And I'll be back at it again today. So, not a whole lot of time for rest. Not a whole lot of time to pay attention to the world around me. But as always, I can't go about my day without following at least a story or two. So, as always, there will be something to discuss, but some housekeeping stuff first. If it's your first time checking out the show, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoy your stay. If you're coming back, welcome back. And either way, if you haven't done so already, you can hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you happen to be listening on. You can, of course, use all the links down below to follow me on social media. You can leave reviews wherever you happen to be listening. Reviews always help. Statistically, one positive review has actually led to about 50 additional clicks because when a podcast gets a positive review, it gets bumped up to the top of different search lists and whatnot. So it helps a lot when reviews are posted, and it's always nice. Of course, I get to read them all through. It doesn't matter where you post it. I can find it because there's a great website for me that combines them all together. So it doesn't matter what platform you're reviewing it on or subscribing from or whatnot, I can see it all. Maybe can't see your username, but I can definitely see that you are all out there. So thank you so much for continuing to support the show. This week, really, there are a whole bunch of things we could be talking about. Of course, one of the biggest stories right now here in Canada is that the Pope is touring. He was in Alberta, and he's going to be in Quebec soon, and then he's going to go up to north to Nunavut afterwards. That's not really the pathing I would have taken. Not sure who planned that trip, because Nunavut is a lot closer to Alberta than it is Quebec, but here we are. Either way, it's all to do with basically apologizing for the Catholic Church's part in the, of course, the residential schooling system that, anyone who is aware in Canada is, full well about everything that the Catholic Church was involved in there. And this is the first really significant step. The Church has acknowledged it, but of course sending the Pope basically on an apology tour is a really big deal. So there was a public mass service yesterday, and he's meeting with the Prime Minister on Wednesday, and then I'm not sure what the plan is when they go to Nunavut, but there's a lot going on there, and of course a lot of Canadian politicians have been speaking out about different ways. No one really knows yet exactly what should be done, because of course we're still uncovering more graves, unmarked graves, mass graves from around these residential schools, and unfortunately without digging them up and desecrating the burial sites. We don't exactly know. We're not able to test the bones and stuff to really figure out like what happened. Are we talking about disease, starvation, abuse? Like, why are these bodies placed here? Were they placed here while the school was present, or like did they build the school on top of a cemetery? These are all questions that like we don't know. We just know that there was some messed up stuff happening. That clearly the Canadian government in its as recently as 1996, along with the Catholic Church, worked together to run these horrible schools that really culturally ruined lives, and it was so unnecessary. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways that a lot of people from younger generations like myself have in retrospect of this. Like, a lot of people are focusing on taking land away and whatnot. Like, okay, I don't actually fall in that argument, because it doesn't matter where you go, land was stolen. So, like, does that mean that, all of Western Europe once belonged to Genghis Khan, like long before any of the current infrastructures? So should they all just say, okay, Mongolia now owns all of Eastern Europe? Like, no, that doesn't make sense. Like, is everyone going to start speaking Italian because the Romans once controlled the United Kingdom? You know what I mean? Like, you can't do this indefinitely. Like, it's a shitty part about being human that we fight each other for land. It's still happening right now. You know what I mean? If you look at Ukraine, a lot of Central Africa, there's a lot of tribal warfare. Papua New Guinea is known for it, as well as Brazilian, very remote Brazilian parts of the Amazon are known for it as well. It's just something that's always happened. However, the problem that I have really lies around not only how we continue to treat them today. Like, there's well over 50, it's close to 100 reserves that don't have running water, don't have access to electricity, even more that don't have access to electricity, and then even more that don't have access to internet and that sort of infrastructure, which is just like terrible. Like, I don't understand how, with a company like SpaceX, which is now broadcasting internet basically across all of northern Canada, like how is it that the government can't figure that out? I don't really know. When you can spend trillions of dollars just handing out cash to people during the pandemic, but yet you haven't been able to figure this out for the last, going on almost 2 centuries, right? But my issue really with residential schools comes in the fact that, like, the residential schooling system really popped up when it was completely unnecessary. Like, you had already won, and it was just an attempt at genocide because we didn't want their communities to exist, right? They were already living on reserve, and we went into the reserves and took children out of them because we didn't want them growing up in that environment. And that's, to me, it's so clearly an attempt at genocide. So luckily it didn't work. It's one thing that clearly Canadians going all the way back have not been very good at is genocide, because we really failed at that. Where you look around, like, there's a reason there's no native populations in Central Europe, right? Because they didn't fail at those attempts at genocide. It's just they happened so long ago that no one really talks about it anymore. But here, luckily, in the Americas, they happened recent enough that the attempt was failed because society kind of started realizing what was going on and luckily put a stop to it. But that's what's making real big headlines right now. But I don't really want to focus too much on that story because, to be honest with you, there's nothing really big that's going to come of it, I don't think, so far. Just kind of reading through the stories and listening to some news reports yesterday and this morning, I don't see that the Pope has done or said anything. Like, he put on a headdress. Some people are happy. Some people are mad because there's a bunch of liberals who think that cultural appropriation is, like, akin to fucking putting a bullet in someone's head. I wish I had no problems in my life and I could be upset that, a native chief put a headdress on someone's head. I wish that was a big problem in my life. But good for you if it is. But otherwise, there's really no news that's come of it. He said hello in, I believe, 5 indigenous languages to start his service on Monday night. I think it was Monday night. That's great. A lot of people clapped, service to the audience. It's like when Justin Bieber is in Ohio and he says, "I love Ohio," and they all freak out. It's like one of those like crowd pleasing things. I don't know. It doesn't seem like as much news. Like, wow, the Pope said hello in Cree. Okay. It's not a very, after, the Pope's, people fucking decimated and killed how many thousands of indigenous children. It's the least you can do. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the updates to do with Monkey Pox, but that's all going to be later. First, we are going to give a different update on the war in Ukraine and conflict with Russia. Earlier this week, the Russian government, so actually they announced it right from the Kremlin itself, the announcement, by everything I can see, didn't come through the, whatever it is, Roscosmos or whatever, the Russian space agency, but this actually came from the Kremlin itself, that Russia is going to be stopping their ties with the International Space Station and creating their own, essentially competitive space station after 2024. So this is a story from the CBC, and it reads, "It was hailed as See, I can't even start reading. I need some bedtime is what I need. Let's try that again. "It was hailed as a post-Cold War collaboration for the good of humanity. 2 old rivals joining forces to launch the International Space Station more than 20 years ago. Quote, "The International Space Station is regarded as the most complex engineering, scientific, collaborative human feat ever managed," end quote, boasts the U.S. National Aeronautics and Space Administration, which is, of course, NASA. But as relations between Russia and the West become increasingly strained due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, officials in Moscow announced on Tuesday that Russia will opt out of the ISS after 2024 and concentrate instead on building its own competing outer space infrastructure. I hate the term outer space. It's not a real thing. Analysts say they worry Russia is quitting one of the last remaining vestiges of cooperation with the West, will set back scientific research, and potentially lead to an increased militarization of space. And of course, this is the biggest fear coming out of this announcement. Quote, "There has been rumbles of this coming for a while, but it is a sad day," said Mubdi Rahman, the founder of Sidrat Research, a Toronto-based space tech firm. He continues, "Even before the invasion of Ukraine and all of Putin's various aggressions, there has been some fragmentation happening in the space community, with nations wanting to go on their own," end quote. CBC News breaks down what Russia's move means for the ISS and the politics of the great beyond, continuing asking the question, who is currently involved in the ISS? First launched in 1998, the main organizations, according to NASA, include the space agencies of the United States, NASA, Russia with Roscosmos, Canada, the CSA, Japan, the JAXA, and Europe, the ESA, which includes the following participating countries: Belgium, Denmark, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Norway, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, and the United Kingdom. Russia and the U.S., however, are widely considered to be the key players. Canada's contribution, for instance, has accounted for an ownership of only around 2.3% of the station, a professor at Western University's Institute for Earth and Space Exploration in London, Ontario, has said. With Russian forces shelling Ukrainian citizens and Western sanctions hitting Moscow's economy, there has been rumblings about Russia quitting the ISS for a while. Yuri Borisov, who leads Russia's state-controlled space corporation Roscosmos, made the announcement about Moscow's planned departure from the initiative Tuesday during a public meeting with Vladimir Putin. Russia, Borisov said, would honor all of its current operational commitments before leaving. Previously, Russia has signaled it intended to leave post-2024, while NASA had wanted to keep running until 2030, which is roughly when the space station needs to be decommissioned, because it's very old. Some analysts, however, consider Russia's announcement more of a public relations move than anything. It's a non-story in my view. Michael Byers, a professor at the University of BC who studies space politics, said of Russia's announcement, quote, "The Russians say this periodically," end quote. NASA did not immediately reply to CBC News' request for comment, nor did the Canadian Space Agency. So, ultimately, this story, I think, is going to be extremely potent in the future. A lot of people don't spend much time thinking about the International Space Station and perhaps don't even realize the ISS significance and the role that it's played in society. I mean, we can start talking about technologies that have been developed from it, but by far the most potent being the microprocessor, right? That came from space exploration. Specifically, it came from demand on the ISS. Not to mention, a lot of robotic systems were developed initially for use on the ISS. We theoretically knew that we could build robotic systems like they use on the space station, stuff like how the solar array can pitch itself automatically to align with the sun as the space station rotates around the Earth and whatever, to maximize the amount of energy that it can produce. That sort of technology did not exist right before this, and nowadays you see solar farms around the world that use this today relatively cheap technology, not to mention satellite systems that use similar technology now, and all sorts of things that that software and that engineering, those systems simply didn't exist. And not to mention other things like Velcro, right, was developed for space exploration, not specifically the ISS. But vacuum sealing, you could have a small machine in your house that costs whatever. I have actually no idea how much they cost, probably $50 or so, to vacuum seal bags, right? That only exists because of space exploration, and specifically the ISS, because they need to do it in such high volumes that the technologies to do so just becomes cheap. We now have public space travel because you have multiple companies who need to fly cargo and people back and forth to the ISS, right? We're not doing, quarterly space missions. We are sending rockets to the ISS 2 or 3 times a month in some circumstances. Forget about all of our satellite launches and stuff like that. By us, I mean around the world, right? Humans are constantly launching things into space nowadays. It's extremely rare to go a week without some sort of payload being launched into space nowadays. And so that's created this whole new market, which, of course, 100 years from now, it's going to be relatively cheap, one would think, to travel to space. Obviously, right now, it's $250,000 for a short flight, but that's quickly going to evaporate if that follows any sort of trajectory we've seen in the past, like automobiles, right? It was only about 5 to 10 years where super rich people had cars, poor people had nothing, and middle class sort of had horses. Well, suddenly horses went away, and within 10 or 15 years, really, even the poor class was able to access automobiles. So that happened super fast. Commercial air travel was the exact same thing, right? At first, airplanes were, no one could ride on planes. It was there weren't even planes around, and basically within 15 years, you could fly anywhere in the world for a few $100s. Obviously, that price has scaled with the inflation of the economy, but even still, it is accessible, right? Nowadays, it may not be accessible to fly from here to Australia or India or something like that. For sure, you're going to spend a lot of money, and there are a lot of people who can't afford that still. But it is widely accessible to fly commercial airlines essentially anywhere in the world, certainly anywhere on or around the continent you live. And so the ISS has been super important for scientific progression, and they've been planning the next model of this. And of course, Russia has been involved in that up until this point. And so they did start scaling back around the time that the war started and making their own plans and whatnot. But now we know for sure that the ISS will belong to us. Russia will probably, us being, the West, Russia will likely launch their own system, probably working with China, I would think, which will be far superior to ours at first, because the ISS they're planning decommissioning to start around 2030. But that means if they get their own operating in the sky by 2027, 2028, they'll have 2 full years of a modernized system before the West is able to, start gearing up for that sort of commitment. But rest assured, the commitment will be made. And, I really do hope that this war goes back into a space race, because the space race was the best thing that has ever happened to society. There were no bullets fired. Relatively few people died, really. And the only people who did die were directly involved in taking, the personal risk and liability of launching yourself on a candle into space. And that's the sort of war that should be fought. It's an intellectual battle between superpowers. And that's going to make things really interesting if that happens again. For years, I've thought it's ridiculous that, we're spending money on things, when there's so much. If you invest in expanding technologies, it's so clear historically how beneficial it's been for the market. A lot of people don't like when governments invest in scientific discovery, but the microchip is literally, look at the richest the richest companies in the world right now and the amount of people they employ, right? We're talking Amazon, Microsoft, Sony, Apple, Spotify. You start going down these lists. Not only, though, how many people they employ, and when you talk about a company like Amazon, there's all this third-party employment for warehouses and shipping and whatnot, but also bringing the cost of things down, right? So everyone can have access to every single song in the world for $7 a month. That's crazy. I know people complain about or $10, whatever it is now. I know people complain about the price of Spotify, but you used to pay, $8 for one album, right? And now this is 30 years later, so comparatively you're spending less money and you have access to every single song ever if you're a music person. That's unbelievable. Something like Amazon, there are people who can't afford a lot of products, and companies like Walmart helped people gain access to those things. But now Amazon's taking it a step further, where it's even cheaper for all of these household products that just make your lives easier and better. I just bought my shower, the way that we built it. It was previously a bedroom closet, and we expanded the shower into that. So it's kind of long. So there was this whole spot when you walk into my shower that it doesn't get the shower doesn't reach it, but it's just there. And so I bought a little shelf. Well, I think it's actually meant to be a bench, but I'm using it as a little shelf in the shower, so I can store stuff on it. And I paid $25 for this waterproof bamboo little thing, and it's just unbelievable. That sort of thing would have cost me hundreds of dollars if it weren't for Amazon. And this sort of improvement in everyday life and the increase it's made to the economies, all because of the International Space Station and the need for a microchip, right? If the microchip didn't exist, the internet would still exist, but it wouldn't be what it is. Right now, I have 2 computers running with 3 monitors, I have my tower that I actually use for recording, and then I use a laptop for all my notes and whatnot. And this is just unbelievable that this technology exists. I mean, 20 years ago, someone would have walked into this room right now and been like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, I have a big neon sign that one of my friends bought me for my studio here that you can program to flash in different colors and stuff. It's unbelievable that the strides we took in 20 years, it's unfathomable, really. And space exploration drives this. And so I'm not happy that Russia is leaving the joint program because, of course, it does potentially lead to conflict, just like anything would. Any breakup, right, could lead to conflict. But it could also lead to more advances in discovery. So, of course, China is planning on landing on the moon next, and the U.S. will be following right after. There will actually also be a Canadian on that first launch. So I believe that, of course, it seems, if things go according to schedule, that the second country to land on the moon will be China, and then the third will be a citizen of Canada. So that's really awesome for us, right? But just in general. And then there's someone from the UK, someone from France. I believe it's a Canadian woman, but I'm not certain about that. That will be on the moon, and it is an American woman who is set to actually be the first to stand on the moon. Not the first, but the next Westerner after the Chinese. I think there are 2 Chinese missions planned before the mission of combined with NASA, the Canadian Space Agency, and the European Space Agency. Now, all of that said, this sort of competition might be the best thing for humanity because the last one was, and that is how I'm approaching this, and that's what I'm hoping we can all take from this if we review, not a year or 2 from now, but maybe 10 or 20 years from now, we can look back and say, wow, that was actually a great step to reignite the competition, spark economies around the world. And, so far the West has always won these sort of battles. It's just been a factor that communism has not succeeded and capitalism has won out because the drive for personal success and personal well-being within all of us and all of our companies supersedes government priority, right? So even though a government says we're going to do this, it's when the people get behind it and the businesses get behind it that you get real advancement in technology, and that's been proven throughout. So hopefully there's only great things to come of this, and I am going to have a positive mindset going into it. The other big story this week comes at the hand of the World Health Organization. I know. When this happened, I think this came out on Saturday, on Sunday. I was at a Rage Against the Machine concert on Saturday night. Great time. And on Sunday morning, I woke up to a text from my brother asking me about this. Just like, what does this mean? Because the World Health Organization has announced that Monkey Pox is now a global threat, and it has reached the level of pandemic. Now, basically, like, what does this mean? Well, if you look historically at things that have been, not historically, but in recent history, at things that have been declared pandemics, obviously one stands out, that of course being COVID-19. But if you look before that, there have been several others. Things like Ebola was declared a global health crisis, as well as H1N1 declared a global health crisis. And basically, what it means is you have to have a certain number of countries, and I don't have that number in front of me, and they all have to have at least 100 cases. That's my understanding is that it's 100 cases, and I think it's 50 countries, but I'm not, like I said, I'm not certain on that. And right now, the projections, I don't have the current numbers in front of me, but the projection is that this is from the World Health Organization in Europe. They have forecasted just over 27,000 monkeypox cases in 88 countries by August 2nd. And I'm sorry, here's the current count is 17,800 cases in 70 countries. So it has been declared a global health crisis. It is reaching the level of pandemic. Now, another concerning thing is that transmission is currently completely unchecked, and this has been said by Antoine Flahaut, a director of the Institute of Global Health at the University of Geneva, and she is also the chair of, the current chair of the World Health Organization Europe Advisory Group. And as long as transmission is unchecked, they cannot get a hold of this virus. And the thing is that it generally causes mild to moderate symptoms like fever, fatigue, and then these painful skin lesions that show up later on. So you're already able to pass it before you see these skin lesions. And generally it resolves within a few weeks with no required treatment. And thus far, only 5 people had died in the current outbreak, and every single one of them resides within Africa. But one of the big problems is that outside of Africa, monkeypox is spreading chiefly in men who have sex with men. So it is spreading mainly among the gay male community. And so sexual health clinics and stuff like that are trying to get on top of it. But a real issue is that a lot of this community is like in the closet, I guess you could say. They're not publicly disclosing that they are members of this community, as I'm sure you can imagine. So that means that you have people who may have been exposed to this who would perhaps otherwise not know because they don't remain in contact with people that they have these experiences with, I suppose you could say. And then further to that, even if they do know, they may be unlikely to seek treatment because their symptoms may not get that bad, they'll just kind of ride it out. So basically the numbers could be worse than we're seeing. That's why a lot of what we're looking at are predictions. And then one last thing that's come out recently, I should not have used the phrase come out, is that ongoing transmission could lead to mutations. And that would make the virus more efficient spreading in humans. And a German peer-reviewed study has found that mutations in one of the 47 cases that they sequenced could help monkeypox spread in people more easily. So, essentially what this means is they took the monkeypox virus as it's being spread in the community right now, I'm assuming from a German sample, and they allowed it to replicate and mutate on its own in these isolated situations. And one of the 47 lab-developed, I shouldn't say lab-developed, because they're really just allowing, they're giving the right circumstances for the virus to continue to live in the lab, right? They're just not killing it, keeping it alive, and seeing what happens. And one of those 47 cases did allow it to spread in people more easily. So right now, it needs to be spread by direct contact. You can't catch it through the air. It's not like COVID, like walking by someone in the mall, you're not going to catch it. You're not going to, nothing like that. There are a lot of studies that show, not a lot, but there are studies at least that show that the contact needs to be prolonged. It's not like you bump into someone in a crowd and you catch monkeypox. It's not like smallpox was, where just being in a room with someone, like if you touch a surface, then they touch you, you catch it. That doesn't appear at this point in time to be the case. That could be wrong though, right? That, of course, early days with COVID, we were wrong. And so, but that's just what the research shows right now. And it's a really good thing that monkeypox is not causing large numbers of death anywhere, right? Like 5 deaths in Africa is, of course, any death is bad, but it's like not nearly as bad as what we were seeing with COVID when it first showed up. And it's really been described by the WHO as an unpleasant virus establishing itself in new populations. So, an unpleasant virus, not something to be too concerned with. But I wanted to talk about it here because, of course, and I mentioned this a few weeks ago, just coming off the backs of COVID-19 and 2 years of lockdowns, and who knows, like, people are already talking about this fall with COVID, what's going to happen? Will there be more lockdowns? No one really knows. No one, who knows? I don't know. So it's definitely worth worrying when you hear that there is another global health crisis. Pandemic levels have been reached in certain regions, and they're expecting pandemic levels to be reached in other more localized districts. Specifically, like in Canada, Montreal has been an epicenter where it has really spread, and they're already discussing if things continue at this rate, like when will we reach pandemic level? It won't be too long from now. So people start to worry after what we've seen, but I think this one we can take a deep breath because, first of all, I want to be very clear about this. Don't make the AIDS mistake or the HIV mistake. It was very famously referred to as GRID, a gay-related immune disease, before we found out that it wasn't just affecting gay people. Now, but doctors literally thought you had to be gay. They thought there was like maybe some genetic thing about being gay that allowed you to contact what we now know as HIV. However, that's obviously not the case, and it doesn't mean that this is not spreading within the straight community and straight people. So, a lot of people that are hooking up with folks, straight people, can catch this. It's everywhere. It is just predominantly in gay communities right now, but it doesn't mean it's going to stay that way. It likely won't. Historically speaking, it doesn't stay that way for very long. And again, that just brings me back to the beginning where it comes to people who are having relations with men on the down low that don't know they have this virus and spread it to, people of the opposite sex, and then, everyone knows how it goes from there. So be cautious, of course, especially if you are a single individual. It's definitely worth taking extra precautions. A condom ain't going to help you here. So I don't know. I don't really know what precautions to take. It's honestly very difficult to see in most cases. If you look at pictures of it, it's like small black spots and whatnot. And when it gets to that point, usually the person knows because it is said to be very painful. But you can spread it before those are visible. So, it's very difficult. But you have to be careful right now. It's just a time to have caution. And if you think you will be exposed to it, potentially, you can ask to get vaccinated. However, they are really not handing out vaccines yet. The smallpox vaccine does seem to be working, and I know they are working on adjusting it a little bit specifically for this virus, and they think they will actually have a proper vaccine for it. However, they don't seem to be planning on mass distributing it, at least not at the moment, unless that it becomes really necessary. My fear, of course, is that we see this spread to children, because with smallpox, that is what, that's the population that was decimated. And I haven't seen studies yet on how this impacts children, or if infection in children is likely, but that would be, of course, my greatest concern is like when you start seeing seniors and children, the two groups who are most impacted by most illnesses, and obviously children being of greatest concern. So hopefully, like I said, we don't really need to hear much more. It just kind of can run its course and fade away. The predictions are not saying that that's the case, but I don't think we're going to be banned from restaurants because of monkeypox. And I will say that my predictions around COVID-19 in January of 2020 were correct. So I'm hoping that I go 2 for 2 here. But that's all we have for today. That's all the stories to cover. I wish I could go to bed, but I have to go work now. So I hope each and every one of you have a fantastic day. I want to thank you so much for checking out the show. Don't forget that you can hit the subscribe button down below. Come back each and every Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tell your friends and family all about it. Word of mouth is a great way to share the news about podcasts and get people listening. Of course, you can use the social media links to follow me. I promised that I would get back to social media in the summer, but as I alluded to earlier, this summer has not been very slow for me, and usually it is. So whenever things slow down, I am dedicated. I'm going to make a dedicated effort to returning to social media and really trying to push myself there. So I apologize if people are sitting around like, why aren't you posting anything? Like, to be honest, I don't even have time to text people lately. I don't have my phone like ever. I'm being horrible. It's taking me like days to respond to people online and whatnot. So apologies for all of that, but I'm putting in an effort. I'm trying to make it work. I'm hoping this is the last week like this in my life, but you never know. But either way, I hope each and every one of you are enjoying the heat. The summer oh my gosh, it's been beautiful lately. Now that the super heat has gone away, at least from this area, it's been absolutely beautiful. Plan on sitting out by the fire this weekend. It's an upcoming long weekend here in Canada, I hope, or in Ontario at least. I hope every single one of you have a safe long weekend if you're here. If you have a regular weekend, I hope you enjoy it just as much, though. I hope you have a great time, and I will see each and every one of you right back here next Wednesday. So until then, keep on laughing and keep on learning.